Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, and you're listening to BriefingsDirect. Our next technology innovation thought leadership discussion focuses on the new user experience and the impact that self-service and consumer habits are having on the new user experience design. As more emphasis is placed on user experiences and the application of consumer-like processes in business-to-business commerce, a softer side of software seems to be emerging. We'll now explore a new approach to design that emphasizes simple and intuitive process flows. With that, please join me in welcoming our guest. We're here with Michelle Sarko, Chief Design Officer at SAP Ariba. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you for having me.
We're glad you're here. You know, there seems to be a link between the skills that are perhaps new to design versus older skills that were software and requirements and sort of a harder edge to technology. How are we seeing a shift in the way that software is designed from that user experience perspective, and how different is it from the past?
I think it's more about understanding the end users first. It's more about empathy and universal design. And what used to happen is that technology was so new, it was a way for us to really challenge technology to do things it didn't do before. Now technology is the table stakes from which everything is measured, and we're expecting it to just work. So what is a differentiator now? The differentiator now is to bring in the human element. And so that's why there is a shift that's happening in software, and the softer side of these things are because we're building it more for people.
You know, we've heard from some discussions at the Ariba Live conference recently about the need for adoption and getting people more deeply into the networks, applications, taking processes to new areas of productivity. It seems to me that this user experience and that adoption relationship are quite closely aligned.
Yes, they absolutely are. Because at the end of the day, it's about people. And even if we're selling consumer software or enterprise software or any types of business software, it ends up being, if people don't use it or don't want to use it, you're not going to have adoption. So you don't want it to become shelfware. So you want to make a good business investment, but you also want your end users to be able to do it effectively. And so that's where adoption comes into key play.
Another thing we heard was, and I forget who it was exactly, they said people don't read the manuals, they don't watch the videos, they simply want to dive in and be able to work and proceed, that there needs to be an intuitive approach to it. I'm old enough to remember when new software would arrive in the office and we'd all get a week to go into training and would sit there for hours and train. No more training these days. So how do people and how should they learn to use new software?
Well, we need to build it first and foremost in context, in product. We're doing new things with overlays, and let me take you through a tour or step you through it to give you just the quick highlights of where things intuitively, such that you naturally apply the patterns that you have to that software. But we should come about in a different way where training is in things are. In addition to that, building in context questions or answers right there with the product. So it's just in time, it's in little snippets, but underpinning all of it, the experience has to be very, very simple so that you don't have to go through this overarching hurdle to understand it.
I suppose, too, there's an architectural change afoot. Before, when we had packaged software, the cycles for changing that would be sometimes years, if not more. Nowadays, when we go to cloud and SaaS applications, where there's multi-tenancy, where the developer, the supplier of the software, can actually change things very rapidly, it really opens up a whole new opportunity. How is it different from the architecture of new software that helps with this user experience benefit?
So the software and the capabilities that we're using now as a step forward in Ariba, in SAP Ariba, is that we're able to decouple the application and the presentation layer such that we can change the user experience more rapidly, do A/B testing, do a lot of in-product metrics and tracking, and still keep all of the deep underpinnings and the safety and security right there. So we're not having to spend all of our time building it way deep into the underpinnings. We can keep those two separate, making us able to iterate a lot faster. So that's enabling us to be able to go quicker and to understand users' needs.
And I suppose the drive to include mobile devices with any software and services now plays a role. We saw some really interesting demos at the conference around the ability to discover and onboard a vendor using a mobile device, in this case a smartphone. How is the mobile if not first, mobile early and often impacting this?
Well, mobile first mindset is something that we always employ now. I mean, this is the way that we should and do design a lot of things because it puts on a different set of restraints, form factors, and simplicity because you only have so much real estate from which to work. And approaching it from that mindset then allows us to take the learnings that we're doing on mobile and bring it back to all the other device options that we have.
Tell me a little bit more about your philosophy about design. When you look at software that maybe has years of a legacy, the logic has been there for quite some time, but you want to get this early adoption, rapid adoption, I suppose. You want mobile first mentality. How do you approach this from a philosophy point of view?
It has to be somewhat pragmatic because you can't move the behemoth of the company that you are to something different. So the way that I'm approaching it, and then that we're looking at within SAP Ariba is look at new ways to improve, new innovations. Start there with the mobile first mindset or really just redesigning aspects of the product. And then at the same time, pick the most important aspects and places of your current product suite and reinvent there. It may take a little more time. It may be on a different technology stack, but it's going to be maybe inconsistent for a while, but the improvements are going to be there such that they're going to outweigh that inconsistency. And then as we go, we'll make that process change overall. But you can't do it all at once. You have to be very pragmatic and judicious about where you start.
And of course, as we mentioned earlier, you can adjust as you go. You have more opportunity to fix things if you need to or adjust them. You also said something interesting earlier, know your users better than they know themselves. First, what did you mean by that in more detail? And then secondly, who are the users that are using Ariba, SAP Ariba applications and services, and how are they different than the past?
What I meant by know the users better than they know themselves, meaning we are observing them, we are listening to them, we're drawing patterns across them. The user may know who they are, but they feel like they may be alone. What we end up seeing is that you are not alone as a user and maybe in a user role of you may just be processing invoices all day, or you may be the IT professional that has to now order all of the equipment for your organization. We start to see you as a person and the issues that you face, but then we start to figure out how we not just help you in your specific need, but learn from others that you didn't even think that you might need a change or something new. So we're looking in aggregate to find out solutions that would fit many and give it to all rather than just solve it one by one. So that's what I mean by know users better than you know themselves. And then who are the users? There's different personas. I think historically SAP Ariba focused mostly only on the customer, the folks who made the purchasing decisions, the business decisions. And what I'm trying to do and help the company understand is there's a shift that we also have to pay equal attention to the end users, the people who are in the product or using the product every day, and those different roles within there, because we have to satisfy both needs in order for it to be successful.
It must be difficult to create software with multiple roles, and you mentioned the importance of being role-based in this design process. Is it that difficult to create software that has a common underpinning in terms of logic, but then has these different roles?
The way that we approach it is through building blocks and systems so that we have design patterns, which are building blocks, these little elements that then get manifested together to build the experience. Where the roles come in is what gets shown or not. So different modules may be exposed with those building blocks to one group of people, but not to the other. So then based on roles and permissions, we can hide and show what's visible. So that's how we approach the role-based design and make it right for you.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose, too, one of the goals for Ariba is to not just have the purchasing people do the purchasing, but have more people, more self-service. Mm-hmm. Tell me a bit more about self-service and this idea that people are shopping, not necessarily procuring.
Yes, because this is really the shift that we are trying to communicate is we come to work every day with our biases from our personal lives. And it really shouldn't be all that different about talking about procurement. I mentioned earlier, this is not really about procurement for end users. It's about shopping because that's what you're doing. So the terminology has to be consistent with what we know from our daily lives and not use technical jargon. So bringing those things to bear and making that experience much more consumer-like will enable our customers to be more successful.
Great. We've already seen some fruits of these labors and ideas. We saw an example of guided buying, a really fresh, clean interface, very similar to a business-to-consumer purchasing environment. Tell me a bit about some of the examples we've seen and how far we are along the spectrum to getting to where you want to go.
Well, we are very far down the path of building this out. We've been spending probably upwards of the past 6 months developing and iterating on these ideas. And then they'll be to market, the first release, relatively soon. And through the process of exploration and working with customers, all of these nuances of policy compliance and understanding what's allowed and what's not allowed, not just for the end user, but for the procurement professional, for the buyer in their specific areas, in addition to for the procurement folks behind the scenes. All of these roles now are thought of as individual players in an orchestra because they all have to work together. And we're actually quite far along, and I'm really excited to see the product come to market pretty soon.
Great. Any other ideas about where we go when we start bringing more reactions to what users are doing in the software? So we saw instances where people were procuring things, but then the policy issue would pop up, the declaration of that's not within our rules. You can't do that. It seems to me that if we take that a step further, we're going to start bringing in more analysis and say, well, you're going down this path, but we have information that could help you analyze and better make a decision. Is that something we should expect soon as well?
Yes, absolutely. We're trying to use the intelligence that we have to make better recommendations for the end users. And then when the policy compliance comes in, we're not preventing the end user from completing their task. We're just bringing in the policy person on the other end to help alleviate that other approval so that the users are still doing what they were starting to do.
Yeah, I think it's really we're on the cusp of an interesting age where analysis from a deep data access and deep penetrating business intelligence types of inserts can be made into process. We're sort of at the crossroads of process and intelligence coming together. Okay, before we sign off, anything else we should expect in terms of user experience enhancements in business applications, particularly in the procure-to-pay process?
I just wanted to mention that this is an ongoing evolutionary process. We learn from you, the users, each day with multiple inputs, talking to them, watching analytics, listening to customer support. And the product's only going to get better with the feedback that you give us. And our release cycles now have gone from 12 to 18 months now to 3 months now, or even shorter. So we're listening, learning, reacting much more quickly than we have before. So expect that you'll see many more product changes. And from all of your feedback, we'll make it better for all of you.
Speaking of feedback, I was very impressed with the feature voting that you've instituted, allowing people to look at different requirements you would have for the next generation or iteration of the software and to vote. Maybe you could just add a bit more about how that might impact user experience as well.
Sure. So that feedback that we get, we look at it holistically, and then we start to see trends and patterns. Which things are we getting a lot of traction on or a lot of interest in? And that helps us prioritize what we call a backlog, the feature list, so that we start to then work based on user input to attack the things that are most important to you and work that way. So your input is listened to. We listen to every piece of it. Also, as you heard from last year, we launched Visual Renewal, and in the product, when you have this switch, there was a feedback form. We read every piece of that feedback. We're looking for trends and how to fix the product and make enhancements based on you. So this is an ongoing trend that we'll continue to do, is listen, learn, and react.
All of which should, of course, enhance adoption and the speed of adoption. So that's
Correct.
Great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been discussing how self-service and consumer habits are having an impact on user experience design. And I'd like to thank our guest. We've been joined by Michelle Sarko, the Chief Design Officer at SAP Ariba. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining this SAP Ariba sponsored Business Innovation Thought Leadership discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.